German Shepherd refused to leave the side of a dead female dog. What they discovered moved everyone to tears. He was just a German Shepherd, sitting motionless on the side of a rural road, next to the lifeless body of a female dog. For hours, no one could get him to move. Not the police, not the locals, not even the rescue team. He stayed by her side through rain and thunder, eyes fixed on something no one else could see. But when rescuers finally approached and discovered what was hidden under the female dog's body, their hearts broke, and the world watching through a camera lens could barely hold back tears. What was the shepherd really guarding? And what secret did this quiet act of loyalty reveal? Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this one, filled with hope, love, and unexpected miracles. The rain had been falling since dawn. In the middle of a forgotten stretch of road just outside the small Jordanian village of Al-Kamra, traffic had long since stopped. The only movement was the occasional sweep of lightning over the hills, revealing a dark silhouette sitting motionless on the side of the cracked asphalt. A German Shepherd. Soaked to the bone, the dog didn't shiver, didn't bark, didn't move. His eyes were fixed, intense and unblinking, locked on the lifeless body of a female dog lying beside him. She looked smaller, thinner, curled as if sleeping, but there was no breath left in her lungs. She had been gone for hours, and still he stayed. Passers-by had seen him earlier that morning. At first, they thought the dogs had just been hit. But as time passed, the rain came harder, and the shepherd remained glued to her side. The locals began whispering about the scene, a story spreading through gas stations and cafes like wildfire. Some believed the dog had been her mate. Others said he was just a stray, too scared to leave. But by midday, a few photos taken by a trucker made their way onto a Facebook group called Souls of the Desert. And everything changed. That's when Youssef Al-Mansour saw it. A 43-year-old executive and co-founder of one of the largest logistics and transport companies in Amman, Youssef wasn't the kind of man you'd associate with animal rescue stories. He was known for boardroom dominance, leather gloves, and blacked-out luxury SUVs. Cold precision, ruthless decision-making. Even his employees called him the Hawk. Not because he hunted, but because nothing escaped his vision. But that morning, something pierced him. Scrolling through his phone between meetings, he saw the photo of the shepherd in the rain. There was something haunting in the way the dog's head was slightly bowed, not like he was guarding her, but like he was mourning her. Youssef stared for nearly a full minute before realizing his meeting was already halfway over. He closed his phone, but the image burned into his mind. He tried to move on. He led a team strategy call, reviewed 3 quarterly reports, ignored 5 messages from his mother asking when he was going to stop chasing trucks and start chasing a wife. But the moment his driver pulled into the garage that evening, Youssef broke routine. "Change of plans," he said. "Drive west. Al-Kamra. Now." The driver blinked. "Sir, that's 3 hours away." "I'm aware." No further questions. 3 hours later, long after the sun had dipped beneath the horizon, Youssef stepped out of his SUV into the mud. There were no streetlights here, just the sharp hum of insects and distant thunder echoing off the hills. He pulled his coat tighter, scanning the road. His boots sank slightly into the wet shoulder as he stepped forward, and then he saw them. The female dog was still lying in the same spot. Her fur was stiff and dirty now, barely visible under the thin layer of rain-soaked dust. But beside her, still unmoving, sat the German shepherd. Youssef approached slowly. The shepherd's head turned just slightly. His eyes met Youssef's. Not aggressive, not fearful, just ancient, like he'd seen something the rest of the world didn't understand. Youssef stopped a few feet away. "You're still here," he said quietly. No response, just a steady sound of breathing from a dog who hadn't eaten in days. A small crowd had gathered behind Youssef's SUV. A few locals, some curious kids, and one young vet who had come on call. Youssef ignored them all. His eyes were on the dog. "He won't leave her," someone said. "We tried everything." Added another, "Food, treats." He just growled. Only moves when someone gets too close to her. "He's not guarding." The young vet whispered. "He's grieving." Youssef crouched, his coat soaking in the mud. She was pregnant, the vet continued. You can tell by the body. Might have died giving birth. Could have been hit, we're not sure. Yusef frowned. Then where are the pups? Silence. No one had considered that. Yusef slowly got to his feet. He scanned the area with renewed urgency. His voice shifted, cold, focused, commanding. Flashlights. Everyone. Search this field. But now. No one argued. It was as if the air had changed. The CEO had taken over, barked orders like he was in a war room. Within seconds, half a dozen locals fanned out with their phones and flashlights, combing through brush and weeds. The rain had softened the ground, and Yusef was already soaked. But none of it mattered. He stepped into the grass himself, guided by instinct more than logic. He didn't know what he was looking for. He just knew something was missing. And then, from deep within the grass, a sound. Faint, weak, like air being sucked through a straw. Yusef turned. 20 feet from the road, curled under the root of a fallen tree, was a soggy white cloth. He dropped to his knees and pulled it back. 3 tiny shapes. So small they barely looked real. Pink noses, closed eyes, shaking, alive. The puppies. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. Behind him, someone cried out. The crowd came running. Yusef didn't move. He lifted the cloth just enough to gather them without losing their warmth, then cradled all 3 in his arms like they were carved from glass. When he turned back toward the road, the German shepherd was no longer sitting. He was standing now, barely, and walking forward on trembling legs, toward Yusef, and toward the pups. They met in the mud. Yusef knelt, and the shepherd sniffed a bundle in his arms, let out a single low whine, then gently licked the tiniest one on the head. For the first time in hours, he wagged his tail. The crowd gasped. The rain had stopped. No one said a word. They just watched as a grieving dog, who had refused to leave the body of the one he loved, found a reason to stand again. Yusef didn't speak. He simply rose, puppy still in hand, and gestured for the vet to follow. We're going to need a safe place for all of them, he said. A clinic? The vet asked. No, Yusef replied. A home. He didn't mean the shepherd. He meant himself. By the time Yusef returned to Amman, it was past midnight. The storm had followed them halfway home, trailing the convoy like a ghost. Inside the back of his SUV, the 3 newborn puppies were wrapped in soft thermal blankets provided by the local vet, who now sat beside them, eyes darting between the pups and the road. In the front passenger seat sat the German shepherd, silent, alert, and staring straight ahead as if he understood this wasn't just a ride. It was a passage. Yusef said nothing the entire way. He didn't need to. His hands were clenched around the wheel, his jaw tight. His mind ran faster than the engine, replaying the moment those tiny lives were pulled from the mud. The weight of it settled in his chest, not like guilt, but like purpose. For a man used to spreadsheets, contracts, and cold negotiations, this night had cracked something open, and it wasn't a close. When they arrived at Yusef's hilltop estate just outside the city, security guards exchanged confused glances. The polished marble driveway, the grand glass doors, everything about this place screamed isolation and power. But now, that world was being invaded by muddy paw prints, towels, and soft whimpers. Prepare the main guest suite, Yusef ordered the house staff. I want it warm, quiet, and ready for company. The German shepherd followed him without a leash. Not a word was spoken between them, but the dog obeyed as if he'd known Yusef forever. Inside the suite, a private veterinarian from the capital had already arrived, summoned hours earlier by one call from the Al Mansour name. She was calm, efficient, and stunned. They're alive, she said, examining the pups on a heated table. Barely, but they'll make it. The shepherd must have kept them safe somehow, even moved them himself. Yusef glanced at the dog, who now lay curled at the foot bed, eyes following every move. Will he be okay? He asked. The vet hesitated. Physically? Yes. But mentally, he's grieving. There's trauma. You can see it in his posture. He's guarding, still in survival mode. What does he need? Yusef asked. The vet looked at him carefully, then smiled. Same thing any soldier needs after war, she said. Time, safety, and someone who doesn't leave. Yusef stayed in the room until dawn. He watched them sleep, those 3 tiny pups, barely the size of his hand, and the shepherd, who only closed his eyes when he sensed everyone was safe. Yusef didn't understand the full story, not yet. But what he did understand was this. Loyalty had a face, and it was lying at his feet. He rose quietly and stepped out of the room, phone in hand. He had work to do. By mid-morning, the story had already gone viral. The trucker who originally posted the photo now updated the thread with new images. Yusef cradling the pups in his arms, the shepherd licking them gently, the villagers weeping. The internet exploded. Comments poured in by the thousands. I've never cried this hard for dogs I've never met. Someone please tell me the man in the coat adopted all of them. I can't believe a billionaire would do this. Faith in humanity restored. The identity of the man in the coat remained unclear at first, but it didn't take long. A leaked screenshot from an airport employee showed Yusef personally flying the vet and dogs home in a company jet. Then came footage from a CCTV camera near the estate gate. And finally, a post from the veterinary clinic, thanking Mr. Al Mansour for saving the animals and for donating an undisclosed amount to fund emergency care for strays across Jordan. Suddenly, Yusef Al Mansour wasn't just a cold-hearted executive. He was a hero, but not everyone saw it that way. 3 days later, as Yusef returned to headquarters for the first time since the rescue, tension met him at the door. Sir, his assistant Dana whispered, pacing beside him in heels, there's been pushback. From whom? Your father. Of course. The elder Al Mansour, co-founder of the logistics empire, was a man of old money, old values, and very little patience for distraction. He was respected, feared, and utterly disinterested in public sentiment. Yusef walked into the boardroom and met his father's eyes. What is this circus I'm hearing about? The older man asked, voice sharp. Dogs? Photographs? Social media campaigns. Yusef didn't flinch. I did what needed to be done. You embarrassed this family, his father hissed. You brought mutts into our home, let journalists circle our estate like vultures, and now you're being called a dog tycoon in international press. I save lives. You're not a savior. You're a businessman, and businessmen don't chase strays. The room fell silent. Yusef stood still, voice calm but full of quiet fire. They weren't strays, he said. They were abandoned, just like people. And unlike numbers, they still have hearts. His father rose, furious. Do you want to destroy what we built? No, Yusef replied, his eyes locking in. I want to rebuild it with purpose. And with that, he walked out. That night, back at the estate, the shepherd was waiting. He had a name now, Naj, meaning star. It was one of the staff who'd named him after watching the way he stood outside the pup's crib every night like a guardian. Yusef had accepted the name, without question. Najm greeted him as always, no barking, no jumping. Just presence, like a shadow that had chosen light. How are they? Yusef asked the live-in vet. Eyes open today, she smiled. They're starting to whimper for him now, not just for food. They know he's theirs. Yusef crouched beside Najm and scratched behind his ears. Just like you knew they were yours, even when she was gone, he whispered. Najm laid his head against Yusef's hand, and for the first time, just once, he closed his eyes with peace. But peace wouldn't last long, because the next morning, something appeared on the doorstep. A letter. No sender. Just a folded sheet, placed in a silver envelope, slipped through the gates by hand. Yusef opened it slowly. You took something that wasn't yours. You don't know who she was. But now that you do, you'll wish you left her there. There was no signature, but attached was a photo of the female dog, and someone standing behind her, face blurred but unmistakably human. Yusef stared at the photo for a long time. The image was grainy, likely taken from an old flip phone, but it was clear enough. The female dog, lying near a torn wire fence, her belly distended. Behind her, a tall man in a long coat stood partly obscured by a shed, his face blurred. but his body posture unmistakably tense. One hand was clenched. The other held a leash. Yusef flipped the letter over again. You took something that wasn't yours. You don't know who she was. But now that you do, you'll wish you left her there. He folded the paper slowly, then lit a match and burned it in a crystal ashtray on his desk. But he kept the photo. By mid-morning, Najm had sensed something was off. The German shepherd hadn't moved from the edge of the nursery since dawn. He kept pacing near the window, his ears flicking back, his tail stiff and low. The pups were oblivious, tumbling over one another in their growing clumsiness. But Najm was waiting, and Yusef knew exactly what he was waiting for. Trouble. It didn't take long for the pieces to fall into place. Yusef called his private security chief, a retired Mossad intelligence officer named Avi. Within hours, Avi confirmed it. The location of the photo was a remote dogfighting compound on the Syrian border. The female dog, whom they now referred to as Layla, had been registered there under false veterinary tags. She had been bred multiple times, likely trafficked. And Najm? He wasn't her mate, Avi said grimly. He was her bodyguard. Or more likely, her enforcer. Yusef blinked. Explain. Avi pulled up a video, low resolution, from the same compound. A younger Najm, thinner, fiercer, teeth bared in a circle of chained dogs. He wasn't attacking, but circling, growling, intimidating. He was trained to keep the others in line. Avi said, a dominant male used for psychological control. He probably lived in a cage until the fights began. The ones who disobeyed, he disciplined. Yusef's stomach turned. And Layla? Breeder. Likely forced into heat cycles. Probably protected by Najm in the end, and then escaped with him. The day she died might have been the first day they were ever free. Yusef sat back in his chair, silent. So Najm hadn't just lost a companion. He had lost the only soul who ever shared his suffering. And now someone wanted to reclaim what they believed was theirs. That evening, Yusef did something he hadn't done in years. He went for a walk. Alone. No guards. No assistants. Just him and Najm, leashless, side by side along the quiet private trail at the edge of his estate. The air smelled like cedar and jasmine. The moon rose pale and wide behind the date palms. But Yusef wasn't admiring nature. He was thinking. He had built his fortune by staying 5 moves ahead. But nothing had prepared him for this. A war not of profit or loss, but of loyalty and life. And it wasn't just about dogs anymore. If someone wanted to hurt Najm or take the pups, they would come, and they would regret it. He stopped walking. Looked down at Najm. Do you remember that place? He asked softly. Najm turned to him. His ears twitched. A low sound rumbled in his throat. Not a growl, but something older. A sound made of memory. You carried them away from that nightmare, Yusef said. Now I carry you. They stood in silence a moment longer, then turned back toward the house. 3 days later, the first attempt came. It was just past midnight. The staff had gone to bed. Security cameras buzzed silently in the background. Yusef was in the nursery with the pups, now named Safa, Juri, and Tariq, watching them roll into sleep under a red heat lamp. Najm was lying at the door, eyes half closed. Then he stood. In a flash, he was up, growling, not barking, body pressed low, teeth bared toward the hallway. Yusef froze. He knew that look. Something was wrong. Seconds later, the lights went out. Total blackout. Then, glass shattered. Yusef scooped the pups into a basket and moved to the far corner of the room. Najm was already by the door, muscles flexed, waiting. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hall. 2, maybe 3. Yusef reached under the crib, pulled out a pistol. He didn't believe in chance. He always planned for war. As the handle turned, Najm leapt. The door exploded inward. Yusef didn't fire, but he didn't have to. Screams erupted in the hallway as Najm collided with a masked intruder. Blood sprayed the floor. A second man swung a crowbar, missed, and Najm lunged again, biting deep into the man's shoulder. It was chaos. But within 45 seconds, it was over. Avi and 2 guards swarmed in. The men were detained. One unconscious, the other begging for mercy. Yusef never blinked. Najm stood in the doorway, body shaking, matted with blood. Not his own. The pups were safe. And now, Yusef knew exactly what they were dealing with. Who sent you? Avi demanded. The man didn't answer. So Avi played the video. It was a compilation of footage from the fighting compound. Layla caged, Najm chained, blood, screaming dogs. Then a single still image. A man, the same blurred figure from the letter. Now clear. The intruder went pale. You don't know what you're messing with, he stammered. This isn't just about dogs. It's a business. It's got backers. Big ones. Yusef leaned forward. Then burn it all, he said coldly. Every name. Every cage. I want it gone. Avi nodded. Already working on it. And the pups? They'll be targets now. We need to move them. No, Yusef said. We protect them here. The intruder stared at him. Why do you care? He asked. They're just animals. Yusef's jaw tightened. No, he said. They're survivors. And survivors deserve justice. He turned to Najm. And so do you. That night, the estate became a fortress. Infrared sensors. Guard dogs. Night vision cameras. No one entered without clearance. Najm never left the nursery unless Yusef was home. And the pups? They began to grow stronger by the hour. Their eyes fully open now. Their steps clumsy, but brave. They followed Najm like shadows. And for the first time since her death, Najm began to play. It was awkward at first. A paw nudge here, a low huff there. But soon, he was rolling in the blankets, letting the pups climb over him, licking their ears when they squealed. He was healing, but the enemy wasn't done. And Yusef knew the next move wouldn't be a break-in. It would be personal. The sun rose over the hills of Amman with deceptive calm. From the outside, Yusef's estate looked unchanged. Immaculate gardens, marble fountains, the soft ripple of flags atop his business empire. But inside, every hallway was alive with movement. Armed guards patrolled discreetly. Surveillance monitors flickered with shifting heat maps. And in the heart of it all, one man, Yusef, moved with quiet calculation. He knew they weren't done. And the last attack hadn't been a warning. It had been a message. The letter had contained no name. But the face in the photograph, now confirmed by Avi's private intelligence team, belonged to a man known only in underworld circles as Jamal the Handler Sufyan. A former dogfighting syndicate lord turned trafficker, Jamal was infamous along the Syrian border, known for his brutality and more dangerous still for his silence. He didn't make threats. He sent messages. In blood. Layla had belonged to him. Najm too, until they escaped. And now that their survival and their story had made headlines across the Middle East, Jamal had a problem. His empire of cages was being exposed. People were protesting. Donors were backing out. A shadow operation years in the making was crumbling, all because of one German shepherd and 3 muddy pups. And a billionaire who wouldn't let go. Yusef watched footage from the previous night's attack again, frame by frame. Najm leaping through the door. The crowbar, the scream, the blood. He paused the video. Zoomed in on Najm's eyes, wide, wild, but not violent. Controlled, defensive. Yusef saw himself reflected in that stare. A creature trained for war, forced to fight. And now, learning what it meant to protect something without hurting, he stood up, turned to Avi. Find Jamal. Avi raised an eyebrow. You want him gone? No, Yusef replied. I want him to see me. Later that afternoon, Yusef held a press conference, but not about his companies, not about mergers or market shares. It was about Najm and Layla and the thousands of dogs still trapped in rings across the region. He stood before the cameras, a single photograph projected behind him, the one from the rescue. Him, soaked in rain, holding the pups, Najm by his side. I am not an animal activist, he began, voice calm but commanding. I am a man who has seen loyalty in its purest form. I have seen sacrifice. I have seen what love looks like when there's nothing left to give. Reporters leaned forward. These animals are not property. They are not tools. They are not entertainment. They are survivors of cruelty that has no place in any society. And as of today, I am launching the Layla Initiative, a multi-million-dollar task force dedicated to exposing and dismantling every known animal fighting syndicate in this region. Cameras flashed. The room erupted. Yusef stared directly at the lens. And to the man who believes these lives belong to him, I invite you to come try. You'll see what happens when you fight someone who doesn't fear cages anymore. That night, Najm howled. It was the first time he'd made such a sound since Layla's death. It wasn't a cry of pain. It was deep, melodic, like a call. The pups stirred in their crib. Yusef watched from the doorway, feeling something shift in the air. A warning, a memory, a bond. He stepped into the room and sat beside Najm. "You still feel her, don't you?" he asked softly. Najm lowered his head into Yusef's lap. "Then I promise you," Yusef whispered, "he'll feel her too." 2 days later, the enemy responded, not with another attack, but with something colder. Yusef's mother. She had been in Beirut, visiting family. She was returning home when her driver was intercepted by 2 black SUVs near the airport. The message was simple: walk away from the dogs, or your family becomes a cage. The Al Mansour name protected a lot, but not everything. Not when the enemy had nothing to lose. Yusef received the news with silence that terrified his staff. No shouting, no rage, just a nod and a command. Secure my mother. Move her to the villa in Cyprus. Triple security. Avi goes with her. But no one touches my family. And then he turned to the pups, now just over 2 weeks old, wobbling but curious. They had begun following Najm to the hallways like ducklings chasing shadows, barking at mirrors. Yusef picked up Juri, the smallest of the 3. She curled in his hands like she belonged there. "You brought war to my house," he murmured, "but they brought peace." He kissed her head, then placed her gently back in the crib. That evening, Najm disappeared. One of the guards reported seeing him by the eastern gate just before sunset. He didn't bark. He didn't resist. He simply waited for an opening and slipped through the hedges. By the time they realized he was gone, 2 hours had passed. Yusef was already in his truck. "No security," he barked. "No escorts. I'm going alone." "Sir, it's not safe." "It's not supposed to be." He drove for nearly an hour, retracing the road they had taken weeks ago, the road where Najm had once refused to leave Layla's side. Something told him the answers were there, and he was right. Just past a bend in the road where the storm had raged, he saw him, Najm, sitting silently, in the same spot where she died. The air was dry now, the sky a velvet sheet of stars. But Najm didn't move. He stared at the earth as if it still held her scent. Yusef parked, got out, walked slowly to the shepherd, and knelt. "I thought you left me," he said. Najm didn't respond, but his tail twitched. Yusef placed a hand on his back. "I know why you came here," he said. "You want to make peace with her. Or maybe ask her if it's okay to move on." He looked up at the stars. "I ask myself the same thing every day." They sat there in silence for a long time. Then Yusef stood. "We go home together." Najm rose and followed, but someone else was watching from behind a shattered fence. Deep in the thorns, a figure in a black coat watched them walk away. A phone clicked. A voice on the other end answered. "They're both here," the man said. "The billionaire and the dog." A pause. "Then do I take the shot?" "No," the voice replied. "Not yet." The man lowered his rifle. "I want them to know what it feels like to lose everything first." They came at dawn. No black vans. No explosions. No alarms. Just silence. It began with a single cut wire, thin, buried beneath the garden hedge that ran along the eastern perimeter of the estate. A small opening, enough for one trained man to slip through. Then another. Then 2 more. No sound. No trace. Inside the nursery, the pups were sleeping. Juri curled under Najm's front paw, Safa and Tarek stacked on top of each other like warm loaves of bread. The heat lamp hummed softly. Outside the door, one guard sat, sipping coffee. He never saw the dart. It hissed through the air, struck his neck, and dropped him silently to the floor. Seconds later, the door opened. Two masked figures stepped inside. Swift, mechanical, efficient. They didn't make a sound. They moved straight for the crib, but Najm was already awake. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He attacked. The first man went down before he reached the pups. Najm's teeth locked into his forearm, a growl erupting from somewhere deep and primal. Blood sprayed across the room. The second man stumbled back, raising a baton, but Najm turned faster than thought and lunged. Then a third figure entered, taller, calm, holding something in his hand, a small canister. He pressed the trigger. Huff! A burst of vapor. Najm's body jerked. His muscles stiffened. His back legs buckled. For a moment, he staggered toward the pups, trying to shield them. Then he collapsed. The third figure stepped over him. Take the male pup, he ordered. Leave the rest. What? Why? That's the deal. In less than 30 seconds, they were gone. Tarek was gone. The security alarm triggered 60 seconds too late. Yusef was in the main hallway when the alert screamed through the estate. He sprinted barefoot toward the nursery. Guards followed behind him, shouting orders, radios crackling. When he burst through the door, the first thing he saw was blood. The second, Najm, still breathing but barely conscious. And the third was absence. Only two pups remained in the crib, Juri and Safa. Tarek was gone. No. Yusef cried, stumbling to his knees. No, no, no. Najm twitched, tried to rise, collapsed. Call the vet, Yusef barked. Now. He scooped Najm into his arms, lifting the heavy shepherd like a child, and carried him to the emergency medical room inside the estate. The vet was already en route, but Yusef didn't wait. He injected adrenaline, flushed Najm's system with oxygen, and kept whispering his name over and over like a prayer. Stay with me. Stay with me. Please, Najm, stay. Najm survived. But something inside him broke. The moment he woke up and realized Tarek was gone, he howled. Not the same howl he sang to Layla beneath the stars. This was different. It was hollow, violent, shaking the windows of the estate with its grief. The two remaining pups cried from the corner. Yusef sat beside Najm, unable to speak. He had failed, not just as a protector, but as a father. Avi arrived 2 hours later with news. The man who took the pup was Jamal's personal handler, he said. The others were hired mercenaries. They were promised 10 grand for a clean job. One is in custody. The others vanished. Yusef's voice was cold. And Tarek, taken to a private location. Likely not dead, yet Jamal has other plans. Yusef clenched his fists. I want to know where. Avi hesitated. Yusef, this isn't just personal anymore. This is a war. He didn't want money. He wanted to hurt you. And he did. I don't care. You have to think about the rest. The girls. Najm, your mother. Yusef turned his eyes toward the surveillance feed, showing the pups curled against Najm's side, trembling. Exactly, he said. That's why I'm going after him myself. Yusef wasn't trained for infiltration, but he didn't need to be. Money speaks. Power moves. And names like Al Mansour opened doors in every corner of the Middle East, even the darkest ones. He left that same night. Took only Avi. No entourage. No PR team. Just one goal. Bring Tarek home. The trail led them through abandoned oil fields, desert checkpoints, and into the shadow of the Syrian border, where Jamal had first built his empire. But what once was a thriving network of cages and cruelty now lay crumbling. Yusef's public campaign had sparked a regional crackdown. Facilities were being raided. Funding was drying up. And Jamal? He was retreating. But he still had the boy. 3 nights into the hunt, Avi received a tip. A shepherd boy had seen a man with a dog in the ruins of an old textile mill near Deir Izizor. The man didn't sleep, the boy had said. He just stared at the puppy like it was a bomb. Yusef and Avi left at dawn. No words. Only resolve. When they arrived, the mill was silent. No movement. No sound. But Yusef knew. He could feel Tarek's presence like blood in his veins. He entered the ruins first, pistol drawn. The smell hit him instantly, metal, smoke, and something else, fear. He stepped through a broken doorway and saw him, Jamal, holding Tarek by the scruff of the neck, knife in the other hand. The pup was whimpering softly. Still alive. Jamal smiled. "I knew you'd come," he said. "Put him down," Yusef ordered. "You stole from me. He was never yours. I made him." "No," Yusef replied. "You broke him. Najm saved him. And now I will finish what they started." Jamal chuckled. "You think money gives you power, but you don't know what power is. You don't know what it means to own something completely." Yusef stepped closer. "I do now." Then gunfire. Not from Yusef. From Abby, positioned on the upper floor. A single shot. Jamal dropped. Tarek ran. Straight into Yusef's arms. He clutched the pup against his chest, heart racing, whispering words in Arabic and English. Over and over, tears streaming down his face. "You're safe now. You're safe. I've got you." The return home was silent. When Yusef entered the state, Naj was waiting, still limping, still weak. But the moment he saw Tarek in Yusef's arms, he cried. A sound no one could describe. A sound that didn't belong to animals or humans, but to something in between. Tarek leapt from Yusef's arms and into Najm's fur. The shepherd wrapped himself around the pup and didn't move for hours. Neither did Yusef. He sat beside them, one hand on Najm, one on Tarek. He had lost his peace, but not his purpose, and that made him dangerous. But the war wasn't over. In the far corners of the criminal world, word was already spreading. Jamal was dead. Al-Mansour had taken his place, not as a trafficker, but as something more powerful, a symbol. And symbols can't be silenced. 6 months had passed. The estate no longer smelled of marble and imported leather. It smelled of cedar soap, warm milk, and dog fur. Laughter echoed through its once silent halls. Staff members, guards, neighbors, even local children now visited regularly, because what began as a private sanctuary had grown into something far greater, a home, but not just for Yusef, for dozens. When the world heard about the rescue of Tarek and the fall of Jamal the handler, a wave of support surged across borders. Donations poured in. Vets volunteered. News outlets ran human interest pieces on the shepherd who changed a billionaire. And Yusef? He turned his pain into purpose. He converted half his estate into a state-of-the-art rehabilitation center for abused dogs. Named after Layla, it became the first high-security, no-kill refuge in the region with trauma therapy, social reintegration, and training programs, not to prepare dogs for labor, but for love. Najm was its face. His photo, eyes calm, one paw gently curled over Tarek's back, became a symbol, not of tragedy, but of redemption. Tarek, Safa, and Jury grew fast. Their paws no longer stumbled. Their barks grew louder, and their personalities emerged like stars from fog. Safa was fearless. She climbed everything. Jury loved belly rubs and stole shoes with surgical precision. But Tarek had something different. Stillness. Awareness. He rarely left Najm's side. And Najm, though his scars never faded, some too deep for fur to hide, he began to smile. Not in the way humans do, but in a tilt of the head, a soft whine when Yusef walked into the room, a wag of the tail that shook the floor when the pups tackled him. Love had rewritten him. And Yusef? He was no longer just the hawk. He was the father, not just to dogs, but to an idea. That healing isn't a destination. It's a daily act of choosing to stay. One warm afternoon, Yusef stood in the middle of a new outdoor enclosure. 4 acres of shaded groves, shallow pools, and climbing platforms. Najm walked beside him, no leash. The pups ran ahead, weaving between trees, barking at butterflies. "They look ready," Yusef said. Najm looked up at him, then trotted forward, head high. Today was a graduation ceremony. 6 other dogs, rescued from raids over the past months, had passed their final therapy stages and would be adopted into families. Yusef had insisted on being there for every one of them. As families arrived at the gates, children holding plush toys and adoption papers, the dogs emerged, one by one. Some hesitated, some sprinted, but all of them were free. Yusef felt his throat tighten. He thought of the first night, the rain, the silence, the body in the mud. He thought of how Najm had refused to move, and now here they were, moving forward together. Later that evening, as the sun melted behind the Jordanian hills, Yusef sat on the front steps of his estate. Najm lay beside him, the three pups curled up in a row at their feet. The light was golden, the sky violet and humming with the last songs of birds. Yusef sighed. I never told you what happened to my brother. Najm twitched one ear. Yusef rarely spoke of his past. He was 8 years older. His name was Amir. Kind, brave, the opposite of me. He used to sneak stray cats into our courtyard, feed them when our father wasn't looking. One day, I asked him why he cared so much. Yusef smiled faintly. He said, because one day someone's going to need me, and I don't want to forget how to show up. A long silence. He died when I was 16, Yusef said quietly. Car accident. I was too angry to cry. I buried my softness with him. Until he looked down at the pups. At Najm. Until you. Najm pressed his head into Yusef's hand. And for the first time in years, Yusef cried. The next morning, a woman came to visit the estate. She was in her late 60s, with olive skin, deep-set eyes, and a cane carved from oak. Her name was Samira, a journalist. She had covered war zones, elections, revolutions. But today, she brought something different. A story. A friend of mine once worked at the compound where Layla was kept, she told Yusef. He was a cleaner, not a fighter. He used to leave scraps of meat under the fence for her. Said she had the saddest eyes he'd ever seen. She pulled out a small notebook. Before he died last week, he told me something. He said, there was a day when all the dogs went silent, the night Layla escaped, and he swore he saw a male shepherd, strong, unchained, bite to the gate from the inside. Yusef blinked. Samira nodded. He said, that dog wasn't running away. He was rescuing her. That night, Yusef walked to Layla's tree. Yes, her tree. They had planted one exactly where she had fallen, in the field by the old road. It was a pink-flowering almond tree, chosen for her. Soft, brave, beautiful. A small stone beneath it bore a simple engraving. For Layla, she ran through hell to protect heaven. Yusef stood beneath it, arms crossed, wind tugging at his collar. Najm stood beside him, silent. Then Tark appeared, followed by Safa. Then Juri. All four now, together again. Yusef knelt in the grass and whispered, you did it, girl. You brought him home. You brought all of us home. Najm sat. The pups curled up beside the tree. And for a moment, it felt like she was there too. In the wind, in the sky, in them. Epilogue. The Layla Initiative would go on to rescue over 2,000 dogs in 5 years. But more than that, it inspired something deeper. A shift in how people saw animals, in how power could be used not to control, but to care. Najm lived out the rest of his years beside Yusef, not as a pet, not as a survivor, but as a brother. When he passed peacefully, curled between the pups who had now grown and scattered into their own families, Yusef held him the same way Najm had once held Layla, gently, completely, and without letting go. If this story touched your heart, remember, love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice we make every single day, especially when it's hard. Subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and share with someone who believes in loyalty, healing, and second chances. Because sometimes the ones we rescue end up saving us. Thank you for watching.